Today, I'm going to show you some neurographic art examples and tell you how it worked for me as a tool for creative problem solving. Hey, I'm Laura Reese, a creative director with over 25 years of experience working with global organizations and leading creative teams. And on this channel, I explore ways to help you step into your highest and most natural creative energy so you can experience the exhilarating freedom of creating your art on your own terms. A couple of weeks ago, I tried neurographic art as part of my daily creative practice. In this video, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what neurographic art is and show you some examples of my own neurographic art. Please remember that I am a writer, I'm not a visual artist, so I'm sure my technique is questionable and I keep making discoveries about how media interacts that I'm positive are obvious to any of you folks that went to art school. But a creative practice is about the energy of creation and how that energy extends to everything else that you do in your life and in your work. So at the end, I'll share my thoughts on neurographic art as both a way to increase creative energy and as a way to creatively solve problems. For this first example, I just used the back of a grocery paper bag for paper, and I used a set of acrylic markers. And I started by just making some big freeform shapes, all with rounded edges. I did some circles, some beans, some pickles, and I did those in 3 different colors. From there, I took the black acrylic marker and I started by outlining all of the shapes. And I didn't make this too neat. If it got outside the lines, I wasn't too worried about it. From there, I drew long looping lines starting from the edges of the paper and going through the shapes a few at a time. And I did that until I had lines through all the shapes, at least one line. And then I just tried to fill it in as best I could. Then wherever there was a sharp edge, I rounded out the corners. I mean, this is like the basic process for the neurographic art. You have shapes, you have lines, and then you have these rounded corners. So I went through and rounded all the corners, and that's how this first one turned out. And this was the first one I did, and I really enjoyed doing it. For my next neurographic art project, I decided to pull out my watercolor sketchbook that I'd made a while ago. And I started by tracing some stuff I had on my desk to get the shapes. So I am using a flare pen here to outline all of these objects on my desk. Then I added the lines from edge to edge, horizontal and vertical, trying to get lines through each of the shapes, and I tried to fill it in an even way. Who knows how successful I actually was. From there, I went through and rounded out all of the corners. Now this one was a little bit different because this pen has a finer point to it and there are more corners, so this kind of took me a long time, but I went through and did all of those. And then I started filling in the shapes with these cool watercolors that one of my clients gave me last year. They were giving a lot of their clients and partners this art set as a Christmas gift, and it had these cool watercolors in it, so I'm using those. And what I found with this was, A, I'm not really that great at watercolor, but B, flare pen bleeds. So this turned out to be a little bit messier than I was kind of expecting it to be, but still kind of fun to fill in all those shapes. For this third example, I just rolled with some regular computer paper and a Sharpie, and I started with the lines instead of starting with the shapes. So I did the vertical lines and the horizontal lines. And then I started with those big free-flowing circles and beans and ovals and whatever else. Of course, I rounded off all of the corners. I was curious if I could use some different media to fill in the colors. So for this one, I used colored pencil and some acrylic markers. And the colored pencil, it was fine, but I'm not great at coloring in big spaces, so I got a lot of just like marks from the pencil. And then the acrylic markers here, they started to bleed through the paper a little bit. So this one was kind of weird.
And then I tried this thing that I have seen a few other people do, which is to, instead of coloring in with one color, these blank spaces, to put some patterns in there with some ink or some black marker. And so I tried this by going in with my Flair pen and drawing a bunch of circles. And I will be 100% honest with you, I found this to be extremely tedious and I did not enjoy this. And so this was the only project that I tried this level of detail on. After this, I went back to just doing big single color shapes. On this final example, I went back to my watercolor sketchbook. I wanted to see if Sharpie would bleed. And as most of you who are artists already know, it does not. And here, instead of doing separate lines on separate shapes, I just did like looping lines to get some shapes and some lines. I rounded out all the corners here, and it's already looking so much different than the first watercolor piece I tried, just because these lines with this Sharpie are getting a lot thicker. And this was one of the things that was interesting to me as someone that doesn't do visual art, just, you know, as I mentioned before, the interaction of the media, like how a different thickness of a pen is going to work, which I know, again, is probably obvious to any visual artist, but for me, it was something brand new to notice and really took my mind off of anything else. So it kind of became like all consuming, and it really did put me into a state of flow. After all those corners were rounded, I went in with some different watercolors this time. They're not as nice, but the colors are brighter. And I was able to get a more even coat with these. And actually, I think it's just because they're not as nice. And so someone that isn't used to doing subtle things with watercolors like me needs something that doesn't allow for subtle shifts in in the layer of the color. On this one, I tried to do what I'd seen a few other people do, which is to add some dimension to the shape. So after that first coat was dry, I did go back in and add another layer of color at the top of each shape to see if like how that would work and what kind of dimension that would give it. And this one turned out kind of neat, so I like this one too.
As a creative practice, neurographic art for me is awesome. To give you a bit of a bigger context, a creative practice is a big part of living up to your full creative potential, what I call full soul creativity. A creative practice does a few things to support you living in full soul creativity. First, it's a way for you to practice finding a flow state so you can enter a flow easier and on demand. A creative practice helps you to find joy in the creative process, as opposed to this attitude where you're just mashing through to the end to get a result. Because it's something that's just for fun, a creative practice helps you let go of the constraints of things like perfectionism, expectation, and judgment about your lack of skill. And overall, it lifts your energy so you feel lighter and more expansive. All of those things, finding flow, enjoying the process, releasing constraints, and cultivating expansive, light energy, have a direct positive result on your work as a creative or artist, and really on your whole life. So neurographic art met all of those parameters for me. Aside from some of those more detailed circles and lines, it kept me very, very focused, and I really looked forward to doing it every time I had it planned. It also kept me thinking of other ways that I could create this type of art using different patterns or different media, which, as you know, once ideas start to flow, it is really exciting, it's really fun and very uplifting. The technique itself is also really easy and extremely satisfying, especially for someone who isn't an actual visual artist like myself. Now, did it help with the creative problem-solving part? Yes. You know how you can get good ideas when you stop focusing on a problem, like when you're taking a walk or taking a shower? Well, this created a similar effect for me, and it let my subconscious mind work through stuff while I stopped overthinking it and just created. I was able to come back with fresh thinking and more clarity. So if you have some examples of your own neurographic art, or you just want to share your experience with it, please drop some links for me and stories in the comments. And if you want a step-by-step tutorial for creating neurographic art along with an accompanying PDF, I have a video for you that I will link below and at the end of this video. Also, if you're interested in exploring more ways to align your energy with your true creative calling, check out my community, Full Soul, where we use a variety of tools to do exactly that. That is linked below, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.